On this episode of the CJ Sweat Show, we apparently have technical difficulties, so bear with us as we try to get things fixed. We're going to be discussing the Ezekiel Elliott suspension and what this means for the Dallas Cowboys. We're also going to get into one of the craziest commercials I saw this weekend that maybe you didn't see. This is the CJ Sweat Show, and we start right now. I'm not bringing the bias here. You are.
What they do up there? Brainwashing?
Hey, it's not my fault that your team is terrible.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
This is just honest. I'm sorry if it hurts. Oh wait, I'm not really sorry.
Put that coffee down.
This is the CJ Sweat Show. We are now live and brought to you out of Roanoke, Virginia. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Wednesday evening, and I apologize for the delay and having to move things over to YouTube. Running into some technical difficulties this morning, but we are grinding, trying to get everything working right today. I am joined, of course, by my co-host Chris Mason. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm long day, but I'm excited because yesterday DirecTV came out and they hooked up my outside patio TV. So it will be football on the patio this year.
All right, awesome. I'll tell you a funny story. Saturday or Friday night, before the big Florida State Alabama game, my wife and I left and we went over to Richmond. And as we're leaving, just kind of go out as normal. We get back Monday, and when we get back, I see my neighbors put out their Alabama flag. They did not, however, have this flag out Friday. I noticed flags very, very well, and that flag was not there. So these Alabama fans, if you want to have any idea as to what they thought about going into that game against Florida State, I think Alabama fans knew that game was a complete toss-up. And as we watched Saturday night, Alabama manhandled them. That game was not close. One of the things I want to get to, though, today is this thing that happens in football season. It doesn't happen in basketball season a lot. Very rarely does it ever happen in baseball season. Like we have often said, and you'll hear this talked about on a lot of different sports shows, that because of Twitter and Facebook and everything, coaches now, their jobs are more unstable than ever, because if you have one bad season, they'll can you. And that's what we like to say. But the reality of this is that is not true in college basketball. If John Calipari goes 20-10 next season, no Kentucky fan's going to get mad about that. They might get mad, but they're not going to call for Calipari's head. Even if they went 17-13, Kentucky fans would be like, okay, bad season, but we'll give him the benefit of a doubt. He's gotten us a championship. Duke fans would do the same thing. Louisville fans, and those are top programs, by the way. Oftentimes at some of these more mediocre programs, we let a team barely get into the tournament one time over a 3-year period, and all of a sudden, we consider that coach to be a good coach, and we give him a 5-year extension. This happens all the time in college basketball. In college football, that never happens. If you go 6-6 at some of these schools, 7-5, or even 8-4, they're going to be calling for your head. And this was on Showcase, more so this weekend than I've ever seen it before. So this weekend, I'm sitting there watching Texas A&M and UCLA, right? It's Sunday night. This, to me, was the game of the weekend, besides, of course, my Liberty Flames beating the Baylor Bears. That was also a good game. So I'm watching this game this weekend, and at halftime, UCLA is getting their tails kicked. They find a way to come back and win this game. But at halftime, when UCLA is down, all of these UCLA fans are saying, Jim Mora needs to be fired. He is not good enough to coach here. Well, then they come back and win. And at the end of the game, UCLA fans are totally fine. But Texas A&M fans, they all want Kevin Sumlin to be fired. In fact, a Texas A&M regent took to Twitter to talk about his issues with Kevin Sumlin. And this Texas A&M regent came out and said that Kevin Sumlin deserves to be fired. And he came out and said that Texas A&M should go ahead and fire Kevin Sumlin as soon as possible. Now, this is why this is a big deal. First of all, it's a regent going on Facebook and saying this. We'll get into why that's an issue in a minute. But the second reason is because if you're familiar with what is going on in Texas and Hurricane Harvey, and some of you are now a little bit ahead of me, you know right now that the state of Texas, their last concern is on what happens with the football coach. Now, I understand that game Saturday night or Sunday night maybe wasn't ideal for you, and you maybe didn't like losing by 1 point to UCLA. But let me tell you something. If you fire Kevin Sumlin, he's got 2 years left on his deal. It's going to cost you $10 million, and you're a public university, which means the people paying that $10 million are those taxpayers who are right now trying to recover from a flood. So you want to talk about insensitive? Let's talk about calling for a coach's head after one game in which, I'll remind you, Texas A&M stopped potentially the best quarterback prospect in the country for 3 quarters. It wasn't until one of the most incredible fourth quarters that was played perfectly by UCLA. I've never seen a quarter like that. It wasn't until then that UCLA came back and won that game. But if Texas that's never going to happen to you again. And in sports, I've always said this. I'm going to give you the benefit of a doubt if a miracle happens, for better or for worse. If a miracle happens and you lose a game that you had that big of a lead, I'm not going to say that was your fault. But if a miracle happens and you find a way to come back, I'm also not going to give you a bunch of credit for that either. Because sometimes in sports, miracles like that just happen. It just happens. So I'm going to take away, like if you're a salesperson and I can see, okay, this year in volume you did 2 million, 2 million, 2 million. Then your third year you did 10 million. And then your next 3 years you did 2 million, 2 million, 2 million. What you are then is you are $2 million a year, not the 1 year you were inflated. And same thing if you did $10 million, 5 out of 6 years, and 1 year you did $2 million. You are, in my mind, a $10 million salesman. And what people don't want to admit about Texas A&M is that before Kevin Sumlin, you were a mediocre program. The 5 years before Kevin Sumlin came to coach at Texas A&M, you were 35-31. The 5 years you've had Kevin Sumlin, 44-21. Now, I don't have to tell you the difference, but this is the same thing I said about Matt Stafford last week, is that when Matt Stafford wasn't with the Lions, they were the worst team in the NFL, arguably worse than the Cleveland Browns. You put him on Detroit, and all of a sudden that team is a capable football team, a team capable of making the playoffs. This is the same thing with Kevin Sumlin. When Texas A&M has Kevin Sumlin, you're not going to always be in one of the elite level bowls or get to the playoffs. But once every 4 to 5 years, he's going to get you there. In the other years, he's going to keep you consistent. His worst year at Texas A&M is 8-5. You didn't have a year that good the previous 10 years before he got there. And by the way, it should also be noted, there are only 2 coaches in the history of Texas A&M that have been better than Kevin Sumlin. One being the legend of Texas A&M, R.C. Scollum, who went 123-47 and had a winning percentage of 72%, and then Bear Bryant, who went 25-14 and had a winning percentage of 64%. So the only 2 coaches in your school's history of being better than Kevin Sumlin are 2 coaches that are legendary coaches. Bear Bryant's one of the best coaches to ever coach the game. And even at Texas A&M, 64% for him was at the low point of his career. That was his stepping stone. Kevin Sumlin, by the way, winning 67% of his games. And here's what you need to consider for Texas A&M. If you fire Kevin Sumlin tomorrow, who do you replace him with? Because even if Tennessee, which is a better program than you, fires Butch Jones, they don't have a replacement ready for him yet. They're still working on that one. So you, Texas A&M, are going to replace Kevin Sumlin with a better coach? Where are you getting him from? Because I don't see him out there. The reality is Texas A&M, you will fall right back into the mediocrity that you've always been if you fire Kevin Sumlin. So I would advise that you do the sensitive thing. Don't fire a coach when it would cost you $10 million a year, and also realize what program you actually are and not who you think you are. All right, I am again joined by my co-host Chris Mason. So Chris, I know you saw that going on over the weekend. Now that game, one of the best games I think I've ever seen. What were your initial thoughts as you watched that Texas A&M UCLA game?
At first, I thought, UCLA doesn't necessarily have it this year, and then they start coming back and just stymied them, in the second half. But just going back to the coaching situation, this is, I'll call it the Alabama effect. You have a team as dominant as Alabama is, and we know now that someone really can't beat Alabama.
Yeah.
So look at all the coaches in the SEC, especially in the SEC West, over the past 5, 6, 7 years, however long you want to go back, that have been fired because they can't make it into the playoffs.
Right.
I don't see any coach.
Every SEC school besides Alabama has fired their coach since Nick Saban got there.
Yep.
Every single one. That includes LSU, Georgia firing Mark Richt. I mean, listen, if you're Texas A&M, look no further than what happened with Georgia. Georgia fires Mark Richt. Mark Richt goes to Miami, has turned the program around like that. I think that's a potential playoff team. We'll get into that later. And Georgia now, last year, loses to Vanderbilt. Kirby Smart right now has lost control of the locker room. That was a story that was out last year. I don't know if that's still the case this year. But if you look at who's come out better out of that deal, it is 100% Mark Richt has come out looking better since that happened. So again, this is what I said about Matt Stafford in Detroit. If Detroit gets rid of Matt Stafford, like you do realize he's going to go to Minnesota, he's going to go to Houston, he's going to go to Kansas City, and because those teams are so much more functional than you, he's going to be significantly better with them than he was with you.
Yeah.
By the way, Alex Smith was not viewed as a good quarterback until Jim Harbaugh got there. And then Alex Smith's stats were even elevated more when he got Andy Reid as his coach in Kansas City. And Andy Reid figured out how to use him. But Alex Smith before that was on the verge of being a bust at a quarterback. He was on the verge of being put on the bench. So, like, the situation always can influence how good of a quarterback, how well of a quarterback performs. Tom Brady, I think, is an amazing quarterback. But if you take him out of Belichick's system, if you take him out of the Patriots organization, is he that successful?
Yeah, could be argued.
Yeah. And again, I think he'd be successful. I don't think he would be that successful. So the other story out this week is Ezekiel Elliott. Suspension from Dallas has been suspension from the NFL has been upheld, and he's going to have to serve 6 weeks suspension. Now, because it was delayed yesterday and they didn't hit the deadline, the courts didn't, Ezekiel Elliott actually will get to play this week against the Giants. But still, regardless, all of these Cowboy fans are out here telling me, oh, it's terrible. 6 games is absolutely the worst. Let me remind you, Tom Brady got 4 games because the NFL thought he cheated. Like this whole, he doesn't have proof that he did anything wrong. Like the NFL is not the court system. The NFL doesn't have to have proof to suspend you. The same way, if you go on Facebook today and just write the F word in all caps and then tag your employer, probably you're going to have a pretty interesting conversation tomorrow. Now, there's nothing illegal about doing that, but your employer can certainly fire you for it. The NFL doesn't need to find that you did something illegal to suspend you, to fire you, to cut you, whatever. They don't have any bearing to our legal system. And so what the NFL is doing, especially in the cases of domestic violence, is they're saying, okay, well, maybe we don't have enough evidence to prove he did anything wrong, but we also don't have enough evidence to prove he did anything right. And because the NFL is a private company, organization, they can do that. Now let's put everything in perspective though. I want you Cowboy fans to realize how if you're going to have a running back, ideally your players play for you, but if you're going to have a running back get suspended, this is the best possible situation ever because he's going to get to play this week. And Chris and I were talking about it. This week, your division could be on the line. The next 6 weeks, though, you only face one elite quarterback, and it's Aaron Rodgers, and it's at home. Every one of those games are winnable. And the one game that now Ezekiel Elliott will be missing instead of this week's game against the Giants will be the Week 7 game against the Washington Redskins, a team I very much believe Dallas should be a lock to beat. So you basically traded getting Ezekiel Elliott for the Giants game instead of the Redskins game. So he's going to play this week, then he's going to come back in Week 8, and he's going to be completely fresh. You're going to get a fresh running back, one of the best running backs, stepping in Week 8 when every other team is battling through injuries. So I get it. You don't want to be without your running back for 6 weeks, and fantasy guys probably are more mad than anybody else. But at the same time, you got to understand as a Cowboys fan, for this suspension to be upheld, this is like a best case scenario for you. Like this is not a terrible situation if you're a Dallas fan.
This thing's not over though. You know that, right?
Oh no, it's not. And I don't have any issue with Jerry Jones or Ezekiel Elliott fighting it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, like, if somebody accused me of that, and I very much believed I was completely innocent, I would absolutely fight it, because it's your reputation on the line.
Well, and if you don't fight it, you look guilty.
Exactly.
So,
no, I don't have an issue with them fighting it.
Yeah,
but I also don't have an issue with the NFL saying, we believe he probably did it, or he could have done it, so we're going to sit him out now.
Yeah. Well, he was found innocent, so that's the difference. Like Tom Brady, you brought up the Tom Brady issue. There's no innocence being found.
But he was found
actually taken to court.
In a court, though. So in a court, you were given the burden of proving the defendant guilty. The NFL is not bound to that same proof.
Sure, but they have their own standards of how these things fall out. That's why it's not over yet. So there's multiple layers of how this is.
Oh, sure. No, it's not over yet.
And if your employer fires you for something that you technically didn't do, in Virginia and most other states, you have the right to sue them for wrongful termination.
Sure.
Which is kind of what's being played out here,
but,
if you understand the example.
No, absolutely. But I also think Goodell, and people like to make fun of Goodell, but the reason he's about to get an extension as the commissioner of the NFL, and I mean by extension, he's going to get more years on his contract. He's also going to get paid significantly more. The reason for all of that is because Roger Goodell kind of knows what he's doing. So I think he maybe even went into this anticipating a lawsuit. But what Goodell understands is that the NFL's brand has been hurt by concussions, by all of this domestic violence issues in the past. And so I think he looks at this as kind of like a transaction of, okay, well, if he sues me, I'm basically paying this much money to at least look better on this front. And I think he's willing to make that trade. Is it a little unfair to Ezekiel Elliott? Sure, probably is. And I don't have any issue with him. That's why I don't have any issue with him fighting it at all. But I also don't have any issue with the NFL being a private organization saying, hey, we're going to suspend you for this. And, you know, I think it goes back to one of those old famous cliches. Don't go anywhere you shouldn't go with people you shouldn't be around, and you're likely to stay out of trouble. Now, I'm not saying Ezekiel Elliott did anything wrong. I don't know that he did. But if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, things like this can happen. And if you're with the wrong people at the wrong time, you can get blamed for things you didn't technically do. So it is an unfortunate situation, but I do completely understand what the NFL is doing. All right, so here's what we were going to do. We're going to take a break. But on the other side, there is one NFL quarterback who I think his career ends this year. You know his name. There's one more, and I think even though he may technically stay employed, his career is essentially over. Who that is, next. This is the CJ Sweat Show. We'll be right back.
Hey, It's your favorite redhead, CJ. I'm sure by now you've heard my opening rant, CJ Thoughts. Well, let me give you my
video.
What's that?
All this stuff is in the video.
Oh, is it? Great.
Yeah, I didn't realize that till about 2 minutes ago. I don't know that it actually matters, but what's that? Nope, even worse. Maybe. We should probably worry about what the video looks like.
I know where I'm going. We're starting here today. And you know that right. You know that's right. You know.
Welcome back, CJ Sweat Show. Good to have you with us. I thought that weekend of football was great. We had the Virginia Tech game with West Virginia. That was a lot of fun. But I tell you what, I'm sitting there watching these games Saturday, and I was really expecting to be paying more attention to the Alabama-Florida State game. But I caught myself Saturday night watching the Liberty-Baylor game, which I kind of thought Saturday evening, that was the most entertaining game on television. It was back and forth. It was tons of scoring, exciting plays. There was essentially no defense, and it came down to one play at the end of the game, and my Liberty Flames pulled it off. A lot of fun. Okay, so this week, something very interesting happened, and it's kind of gone unnoticed. Like, nobody's talking about this, but the New England Patriots traded away Jacoby Brissett over to the Indianapolis Colts. And this trade, I think, signaled two major things in the NFL. And that is, one, I think Tom Brady is going to retire this year. And I was kind of on the fence about it, thinking maybe it could happen, maybe it won't. But the reason I think this happens is because if Brady was going to stick around, the Patriots would need to hang on to Jacoby Brissett because Garoppolo would leave out of fear that he's not going to get to play next year. And so now that they have traded away Jacoby Brissett, the Patriots are now looking at this like, okay, Brady's going to leave, or we're just going to let him go, and Garoppolo's going to be our guy next year. And that one I think was pretty obvious. That one I think a lot of people are catching on to. And I think that means Tom Brady, this is his last year. And if you look at what Belichick has done, we were talking about this earlier. Belichick used to be the GM that stockpiled draft picks. And they would have at any given year 8 to 11 draft picks each year. And it would all be like 3rd, 4th round draft picks. And then he would bring in guys and build a team. But like if you look at the Patriots, I have no idea what the plan is long term. What I do know is they're really, really, really built well to win these next 1 to 2 seasons, and they're going to be phenomenal. And I think all of that is Belichick is going, okay, I've got 1 more year left with Brady. I'm pushing everything into the table. I'm going all in for one last championship. Now, that is interesting for one reason, which we'll get to in a minute. But the other thing I think happened with this trade, Jacoby Brissett is now in Indianapolis. Andrew Luck has yet to take a snap with this team. Now, he's expected to miss the first week. And I got to tell you, friends, I don't know when he comes back. We're not just talking about somebody missing a game. Right, Chris? We're talking about somebody who's now missed practice for the 7 weeks that teams have been practicing. That's a huge chunk of time. He's not taken a snap. This is now the 3rd time in his career where he has had to deal with this. I think Andrew Luck's career, even though he might stick around in the NFL, I don't think we're ever going to see Andrew Luck perform at the high level he did 3 seasons ago. I think that's done.
I think he's too competitive for that. I think he'll be around for a while.
I'm not saying he doesn't want to play. He wants to. I just don't think you can physically recover from that.
Yeah. Well, maybe. I mean, he's kind of like Roethlisberger. You're going to have to build a system around his limitations and capabilities.
Yep.
But I don't look too deep into this trade like you do. I think it's more so like, we have a backup quarterback that can play now if Brady steps out in the system. So it's like, okay, if we're going to trade away one of our quarterbacks, let's trade away the one that's the big question mark and keep the one that we know a lot about here in the next. So if something happens with Brady in the next 1, 2, 5 years down the road, I don't think we'll go 5 years, but we know we can plug in and keep playing.
Well, listen, But the thing is there's not been a quarterback who has come back from this many injuries and been great. Like, Roethlisberger is considered to be a bit of a fragile quarterback. But from the early to the middle part of his career, he was very stable and hung out in that offense. And really, it was hard to get him on the bench. Now he's got a little bit more fragile, but he still plays and takes snaps. Andrew Luck now, I mean, we're talking about even when he was playing last year, he wasn't really even there. And it all comes back to what I have said is the biggest issue with Indianapolis. They have not, since he's gotten there, done anything to improve that offensive line situation. And this is why I think, because Andrew Luck, I think he's going to win a Super Bowl anymore. I think that is done. I think him being an elite level quarterback is done. Now, he'll stick around in the NFL. I just don't think he'll be elite. But this is why I've always said, when you get leverage, use it. And this is why I don't have an issue with LeBron James leaving Cleveland to go to Miami and then leaving Miami to go back to Cleveland, or Kevin Durant leaving Oklahoma City to go to Golden State. We always like to talk about what the star goes to. Like, he's going to play with Kyrie. He's going to play with Dwayne Wade. So it makes it look like, oh, he's taking the easy way. He's going to play with Stephen Curry. What we never talk about is what the player is coming from. We never say, oh, LeBron has been the economy in Cleveland. That's how valuable he's been. We never say, oh, he's going from a fragile roster in Miami to a younger roster in Cleveland. We never say that. We always say, oh, he's taking the easy way out. But you want to know why you use leverage when you get it? Because the alternative, when a company does not treat you right, is your career being ruined. And the Indianapolis Colts are absolutely ruining Andrew Luck's career. And this is why, if I'm Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen, I'm paying very close attention to this. And if I'm Sam Darnold and the New York Jets want to draft me, I'm not coming out of college. I'll stay at USC for one more year. Why would I come out of college? To play for the Jets, who haven't had a decent offensive line or a decent coach in forever? To go play with the Browns? I'm not going to do that. And if I was Josh Rosen and I got drafted this year by one of those teams, I would absolutely pull what Eli Manning pulled. And I'd say, well, I'm not going to play for this team or that team. I'll only play for a select handful of teams, and those are the teams that can pick me up. That's what Eli Manning did. It's what John Elway did. And I don't have any issue when a franchise like Indianapolis has treated Andrew Luck the way they have. I don't have an issue with one of these players saying, I've got the leverage here. I'm not going to play for these 5 teams, but I'll take any other team.
Yeah, that's fine with me. But I don't see guys doing that just because the massive amount of money that's involved. I mean, occasionally if you don't need the money or don't necessarily want that extra increase. But
I mean, what you're talking about though is, and here's the thing, like if Andrew Luck hit the market tomorrow, he would not get paid the top dollar for a franchise quarterback. Like, he would not get the contract Matthew Stafford got. Because what an NFL team would say is, well, you're not available because you're so injury prone now. And it was the same thing with Derrick Rose. Like, Derrick Rose can't get all-star money. Now, Derrick Rose was built kind of fragile, and that was a little bit of a different situation. But the point being is if you can't hang out and play, you don't get paid. And so the issue now is Andrew Luck's career has been influenced by this. But if you're a rookie quarterback, if you go pick 13 instead of pick 1, yeah, you might get paid a little bit less those first 4 years, but after that initial contract ends, if you're drafted by like Denver and you're playing with a good team that's going to protect you, influence your career, help you out, then you're going to get a max deal.
Yeah, I agree.
And at that point, if you take the long-term approach like I'm suggesting, you end up making a lot more money that way. So it is tough. I do think Andrew Luck's career, after what I'm seeing now, things look ugly. But it is time now to get to our weekly segment, In the News with Chris Mason.
Okay, in the news, tennis. We have the U.S. Open Championship continuing today. Roger Federer faces Juan Martín del Potro, and the winner of that will play against Rafael Nadal in the semifinals. So, CJ, should be an interesting match in the semifinals.
All right. I probably won't be watching. Now, did you watch any of the tennis? Or I know golf had a big tournament this weekend too, right?
Yeah, I didn't watch any golf. We actually were doing some traveling, spending some time on the beach. So I watched very little sports outside of some football.
Yeah.
But Nadal, Federer, semifinals, that's all you need to know in tennis.
That I'll tell you what, that will be compelling if those two match up together. I also want to see Maria Sharapova. Is she still in it?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure, but Venus Williams has made the finals 20 years. Get this, 20 years after her first time in the finals at the U.S. Open. That's actually a story in news that
I would say she is, like, to me, Tom Brady right now is probably going to end up being the most accomplished athlete. But Venus Williams is the most accomplished female athlete, in my opinion. I don't know who would be ahead of her in that regard.
No, that's a good point.
Or I guess is it Serena Williams?
Well, both of the Venus is
they're
the
both
one.
incredible.
Venus, I believe, is the one playing. Serena just had a baby.
Yeah.
So
just had a baby, ran over somebody in her car. She's had a pretty eventful past 6 months.
Yeah, outside of tennis, yeah. All right, NFL officially, this NFL season officially starts tomorrow night. Kansas City at New England.
There we go.
And to close out, we're going to have 2 Monday night games.
That's awesome.
New Orleans plays at Minnesota, and then we have a West Coast game as well, too, who I didn't write down who's playing. But what do you think about these Monday night 10-20 start games?
I think it's Chargers and Broncos Monday night.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think the NFL has sent a strong message to ESPN. Like, if you look at their schedule of games, they only have maybe 2 compelling games, but it is a lot of Saints at Vikings, Bears at Rams. Like, it's a lot of average to bad quarterbacks. So, I mean, this weekend I'll be interested to watch Chargers and Broncos. And again, I think that's the other Monday night game. I'm pretty sure.
It's at 10:20 at night. I think.
Okay, but it's the Broncos defense against the Chargers offense, and the Broncos don't have a quarterback.
Yeah, but East Coast has their lights out. I mean, I'm asleep. I have two kids.
Oh, I'll watch football. I'll just be dead on Tuesday. But like when football comes back on, I mean, seriously, I'll sit there with a bag of nachos and just continue to gain weight.
Also in NFL news, we talked about this. Ezekiel Elliott's suspension was upheld by the NFL arbitrator Harold Henderson. He's ruled eligible for Sunday's game against the Giants, but we'll be out for the next 6 weeks. And I think we have more news to come on this probably in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, I don't know that it'll take 2 weeks. I can tell you the courts are probably looking at this like this is not our top topic of mind right now. they probably got other things they need to worry about than how many games an NFL running back can play. But I also think the NFL's got leverage in a lot of scenarios like this, and I don't think Goodell or Jerry Jones, it's in their best interest to wait on this. So yeah, I think there will be a push to get a decision on it sooner rather than later.
And finally, multi-sport news here. Many college and professional games have been suspended, moved, or canceled altogether as Florida braces for Hurricane Irma.
Yep, Hurricane Irma. Weird name for hurricane, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, like, of the hurricane names, that, I don't know. That one would be weird.
I saw a pretty funny thing on the internet that they shouldn't name hurricanes these names. They should name them like Megatron will mess up your whole state. So people will actually, leave like Irma. You're not afraid of Irma. That's like somebody's 95-year-old grandma. But Megatron, you better get the bleep out of where you're at.
Yeah, no, that's good. All right, what else we got?
That is the news.
That is the news. All right, thank you, Chris, with the news. The interesting thing about that is Miami. So Miami this weekend was supposed to play Arkansas State. That game was just completely canceled. They did not reschedule that game. And so that means Miami gets an off week this week. And then do you know who they play next weekend? They play Florida State, who just played Alabama and will be without DeAndre Francois for the rest of the year. Now, I think Florida State could still be a formidable opponent, but I will tell you, when you lose a quarterback like that, your toughest games are your next 2 to 3 games. And Florida State will still be coming off that emotional Alabama game. This will be a home game. I think Miami will be a strong favorite to win that game, and I think this just influences, or helps rather, my pick of Miami to sneak into the college football playoff as the number 4 team of the country. All right, so here was something that happened this weekend, and I don't know that you paid attention to it. It was really, really quick. Somebody tried to sneak it under you without you noticing. Somebody tried to sneak it in there without you noticing. So the Football Foundation, the American Football Foundation, or National Football Foundation rather, is this group that seeks to promote the game to kids and to families and things. And so they ran a commercial over the weekend. And I'm only going to play a clip of it. It's only going to last a few seconds, but this was part of that commercial. This is, by the way, Pam Martin, the mom of the Cowboys offensive lineman, Zach Martin. And here she is talking about football.
Can't be afraid because they might get hurt.
Now, that's only 3 seconds of what was a 30-second ad. So it's super, super quick. But the reason this is important is because you notice how they sneak in there, can't be afraid of if they might get hurt. This is a message not being conveyed to you by the NFL, but by the Football Foundation, who has some of the same interests. And I think this is one of the dumbest commercials I have ever heard or seen played on my TV. The reason being is because what you're now conveying to moms is, you're conveying, well, you shouldn't be worried about your kid's safety. And that's the wrong message to convey. What you should be conveying is we are taking steps to protect your children. The game is getting safer. We're doing more research, working on making the game safer. Anytime you start trying to tell parents what to do, especially moms, that's when they start putting their guard up. And the NFL, I think this was a bad commercial for them to be played. I saw it, and really the one who pointed it out to me was my wife. And she was like, wow, that really sends a bad message to me if I were a mom telling me I shouldn't fear for my kid's safety. Now, Chris, you heard the commercial. What did you think of that? As you think of, your kids and then potentially playing football, do you have an issue with this?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a reason now why kids are playing, multiple reasons, but a main reason why kids are playing soccer, lacrosse.
They've even gotten into baseball. Baseball's numbers have gone up.
Baseball numbers have gone up. So it's going to be interesting how this plays into, in really soon time, high school football and then college football and NFL and the talent level and what we're watching. Yeah, this whole thing about, how you should parent your kids, that's a bunch of malarkey to me. Now, on my side of things, and the way I look at it is, if the kid says, "Hey, I like to play football," I'm going to buy him a football helmet, some shoulder pads, and,
Right.
and give him anything he needs to get on the team. Right now, we're not into that right now. I actually asked my son, what's his favorite sport? What does he want to play? And he's into soccer. I'm like, thank God, because that's like, a couple $100 I can put back in my wallet because I don't have to buy the helmet, the shoulder pads, and things
Sure.
like that. And that's
Yeah.
another thing that's leading into this is football is expensive.
Oh, it is.
You have like water sports where you need a boat, and then golf where you need a country club membership, and then football is right up there with it as far as
Well, it's not just
expense.
expensive, but it's a lot of high maintenance. I mean, I remember when I was playing, like, you got to keep your pads clean, you got to keep your helmet clean. Like, they send you home with that stuff, especially at the early ages.
Yep.
And it's all up to the parents to really keep track of all that stuff.
You
being
always
clean.
lose a knee pad or a butt pad, and you're searching around for it right before the game.
Losing a butt pad is the worst.
Yeah.
That's if you're gonna lose a pad, that's the worst one to lose.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man. As far as safety is concerned, like this sounds like torture to me right now. But I remember growing up playing Little League, and we're talking about August, right? You have all
Right.
these football pads on, and you're sweating. And it's 95 degrees outside, and then if you don't do what your coach tells you to do, he says, "Guess what? It's water break, but you're not getting any water," and you're like over there dying of thirst.
Yeah.
And I can just imagine these kids passing out, and so multiple issues around football. Now that's not going on today, or at least. If there is, it's probably going to be on social media here shortly. But.
Well, and this is why I think if you're a football fan, you cannot ignore the current issue of concussions. I don't believe this has influenced football the way the media or Twitter likes to portray that it has. I don't believe that CTE is really even as big of a deal as we make it out to be, albeit it definitely has some effect. But at the same time, you can't just completely ignore it, and you certainly can't tell a mom, don't fear for your kid's safety. That's like, you go to pick up somebody's kid because that kid's friends with your kid, and you don't force your kids to buckle up in the car, and so that kid gets in there, and then that mom gives you a call and say, hey, you didn't tell my kid to buckle up, and we always have a rule about buckling up, and you say, oh, don't worry about it, it'll be okay. If that happens, I can guarantee you that mom does not allow your kids to hang out anymore, or at least with you driving in the car. It would be completely off. And so some of these other sports, like soccer, like baseball, like track and field, lacrosse, they're not nearly as physical, okay? And I think this is a big issue that the NFL is going to have to confront, and the Football Foundation's doing you no favors by putting this commercial out there. I thought it was one of the poor points of the weekend. All right, now let's get into one of my favorite segments. This is called Buying or Selling. So we're going to give you a few teams that we are buying or selling after what happened this weekend. It's all going to be college football teams. So, Chris, give me one team that you're buying or selling this week.
Well, not necessarily. I'm more into them than I was last week, okay? And the reason is their defense. I am buying Alabama's defense. They held Florida State, who's one of the better offenses in the nation, to 40 rushing yards the entire game.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just an unbelievable... The entire team, right? So not just one back, 40 total rushing yards. They had 2 interceptions and forced 1 fumble. And another thing, including the defense, special teams, Florida punted the ball 6 times for an average of 31.5 yards. CJ, I can punt the ball 30 yards. And, look, I'm a fat, middle-aged white man. So a 20-year-old kid should be able to dominate that. And it's not the punter's fault. It's these guys are coming in block, punt block and just giving it to them. So Alabama's defense, I am buying Alabama.
Yeah, Alabama looked good. I tell you what, though, there's one team out there that I'm buying, and nobody's talking about them, and it's why I'm buying them, because I think the price right now is low, and that is LSU. And if we did our rankings today, I would probably have LSU at around 6th or 7th. The reason I did not have them ranked that high last week when we did our ranking, or 2 weeks ago when we did our rankings, was because LSU was a really good defense that did not possess a good quarterback or a good offense, in my opinion. But then this weekend, I saw this team play BYU. They dominated BYU. A good BYU offense that has a good quarterback, had a good running game, and they play a physical type of football. LSU dominated them, and then LSU got good quarterback play out of Danny Etling, who went off this weekend. And if Etling's going to play like that, then LSU's going to be awfully good. And if you want to try and put this in perspective, BYU, according to Vegas, would be about the fifth or sixth best team in the SEC right now. That's how good BYU is. So LSU just went and smoked a team that good. I'm all over that team. Now, I think they could be a surprise playoff team. We talked about those teams capable of going anywhere between 9 to 11 wins, but not necessarily being an elite program. That's one, and that's why I think LSU, at this moment, I am putting everything in that stock. They look really, really good. All right.
On to me, Penn State. I am buying Penn State. Look, they didn't play anybody, but they just looked amazing. They held Akron to a total of 159 yards. In total, they had over 550 yards of total offense. They're stacked. Their lineup stacked with juniors and seniors this year. And look, this program is a historic program that's been down because of some off-the-field issues, and rightfully so, but they've got something to prove. I mean, these kids that go to Penn State, a lot of them are coming from alma mater, or just they've been fans through their entire life. There's too much tradition there, and they're going to turn this program around, and this is the year. Look, I didn't have them ranked that high, but after watching the first game, they looked really good.
Yeah, no, Penn State, it's a tough team for me because I like everything about them, but they're a little young. Love their running back. I just don't know how well do they match up with Ohio State, or I mean, like Michigan this weekend. Michigan looked really, really good, and that's the team I'm now buying is Michigan, because Michigan went into Florida, on the road in Florida, and just completely shut Florida down. And that is a talented Florida team who I think is well coached by Jim McElwain. But even Jim McElwain was like, yeah, we got our tails kicked. And it is this physical style of play. I think Michigan, they were most vulnerable this weekend. They only get better because that's a young team. So Michigan's the team right now I'm buying.
CJ, this one's directed direct at you. I mean, this one's for you. And I am selling the ACC.
Really?
All of them. You come in here week in and week out and tell me how dominant.
No. Virginia Tech just beat West Virginia.
Okay. All right. Well, you're going to tell me Virginia Tech beat West Virginia. You're going to tell me, well, their record as a whole was 10-4. All right. They won 10 games and only lost 4. But let me give you some of the teams that they beat: Youngstown State, Central Connecticut, William and Mary, Northern Illinois, North Carolina.
Hey, Northern Illinois.
North Carolina Central, Kent State, Presbyterian College.
Do you know their nickname, Presbyterian?
No.
The Blue Hose. That's not a joke.
Bethune-Cookman. What is that? There's a school out there called Bethune-Cookman. What state are they in?
Florida.
Okay.
They're the Bobcats.
And then they did have wins against West Virginia and Louisville. Probably one of the top teams beat Purdue, which is not that great of a team. But let me tell you who they lost against. Okay.
Now there was one very embarrassing loss.
Now there was a team they lost against Cal.
Yeah, and that was one on the Saturday 6. Now you and I were both wrong on that one. Actually, no, I
picked Cal losing, but I picked them covering the 13.5 spread. But then tell me what these three teams have in common: Alabama, South Carolina, and Tennessee.
Now hold on. Okay, Tennessee should have beaten Georgia Tech by about 10 points. At least.
I don't disagree with that. But my argument is they played 10 games of all they should have won, and then they played about 4 games. One they definitely should have won.
Yeah.
The other ones are arguable. Like Florida State should have made it a game against Alabama. They got waxed.
Yeah.
Tennessee probably should have lost. Cal should have got beat, and I'm blanking on who they played.
No, Cal played UNC.
UNC.
So UNC
Cal should have got beat.
Yeah.
The teams that they should have made a game, they lost single one of them.
NC State was the one team that completely shocked me this weekend because I went into this weekend thinking that one's a lock for me. I thought NC State was going to roll over South Carolina. And I also thought UNC was going to smoke Cal too, but I'm a little concerned about Brandon Harris at quarterback, and that turned out to be a much bigger issue than it was. Some of the ACC, though, and this is one of the things we've discussed, is this conference is super, super talented, but it's also really young. So them not having a great first week doesn't really surprise me. The biggest surprise of the week was NC State getting smoked by South Carolina, and then Louisville barely getting by Purdue, because Louisville, to me, that should be one of the premier teams in the league. But this is why I think Miami is almost a clear shot to the playoff, because who in the ACC this weekend looks better than Miami? Like, Tech looked good. They don't look better than Miami, though. Tech's have to play Miami at Miami.
Josh Jackson. Oh, my gosh. What a surprise.
Yeah, Josh Jackson looked good.
I'm buying Josh Jackson. But anyway, sell the ACC.
So he's selling the ACC. The team that I am selling is in the ACC, but it's Florida State. And I didn't have them ranked high to begin with. I had them, I believe, at 7th in my preseason rankings. But I'm going to sell them now because their concerns just got that much more. Now you're still playing a tough schedule, and you're without DeAndre Francois. That, to me, is a big, big issue for Florida State. I don't know that they get to 9 wins, Chris. That could be an 8-4 team by the end of the year. And Clemson, by the way, is a team you didn't mention. If you watched any of that Clemson game, they offensively look like they may not be missing a step this year, and that's a little bit scary to think of.
We'll find out this weekend.
Yeah, they got to play Auburn.
Yeah.
And that's a tight game. We're going to discuss that one on the Saturday 6th this week. But there is buying and selling. All right, to end today's podcast, Chris has to make an apology for something he did earlier in the week. So we used to do this on this podcast. Every single week I would give you something I'm sorry about. And so we're going to try and bring that back one week. It's going to be called I'm Sorry, Joe.
Sorry, Joe.
Sorry, Joe. So here it is. Sorry, Joe.
So this is directed at Joe, particularly Joe. I'm looking at you, Joe. But Joe, in all the other instances, is the fan base of whatever team we're apologizing to. So in this case, it is the Virginia Tech fan base. I said there was no way. I said without a doubt they're losing against West Virginia. I underestimated Jeff Jackson. That kid can play. I underestimated Virginia Tech's defense. They really showed up in that last drive to stop West Virginia.
I told you this weekend that defense is for real.
That was a very, very good show on the Virginia Tech defense.
Yeah.
So I underestimated Virginia Tech a little bit. I'm still talking about buying and selling. I'm not 100% sold on them, but they did. Number one, they won the game. Number two, they covered. Yep. So I picked against them. I said there was no way they were going to win the game as the favorite, and they did both. So I'm sorry, Joe.
Well, listen, the apology is accepted, but I told you that Virginia Tech would win that game. Now, if you watch the Saturday 6th, we recorded that and it went live on Saturday. That will be back this weekend. By the way, we are now available. That podcast is available on Google Play and TuneIn Radio along with iTunes.
There's a lot of good games this weekend. I mean, we've got Auburn,
some
Clemson,
great games.
Oklahoma, Ohio State, Georgia, Notre Dame. All those will be discussed, and a few more. Yeah,
so here's what we're going to do. We're going to put this out Saturday. It's going to go out Saturday morning. And here's what I want you to do. When this goes out Saturday morning, we're going to put out our 6 games that we're predicting. I want you to also tell us what your predictions are. We're going to keep up with it. This week, Chris went 4-2 against the spread. I went 3-3. And to be quite honest, Chris, if we both are trading off 4-2s and 3-3s throughout the season, we're going to both end above 500. And if you're betting, where do you want to be? Above 500, because that means you made money, right?
Yep.
So that's exactly where we want to be. If you want to make money in betting, we're the podcast to listen to. There's no guarantees, though. Saturday 6, Saturday 9 a.m. will be broadcast on iTunes. We're going to be live again next week. We've got exciting news. And on that Saturday 6 podcast, before I forget, Ben King from the E2C Sports Network will be joining us as we run through some of the 6 best games this weekend between college and the NFL, along with one big fantasy prediction. This is the CJ Sweat Show. Have a good night.
All right, here we go.